The blistering sun beat down on Sweetwater Creek, casting harsh shadows across the dusty main street as Savannah Miller stepped off the stagecoach. Her once fine blue traveling dress was now wrinkled and coated with a fine layer of dust, much like her spirits after the grueling 3-day journey from St. Louis. The year was 1878, and at 23, Savannah found herself utterly alone in the world, clutching nothing but a single valise and the letter that had brought her west. "This is it, madam," the driver called down, dropping her small trunk unceremoniously into the dirt. Sweetwater Creek, Wyoming territory. Savannah surveyed the ramshackle town with dismay. A saloon, general store, blacksmith, and a handful of other weathered buildings lined the single dirt road. Nothing like the thriving community her late brother's letter had described. Another broken promise from Thomas, even from beyond the grave. "You waiting for someone, miss?" the driver asked, already climbing back onto his perch. "No," Savannah replied, lifting her chin. "No one's waiting for me." She'd come to claim her brother's property, a small ranch outside of town he'd acquired shortly before typhoid took him. It was all she had left in the world after losing their parents 2 years prior and the family home in St. Louis to creditors shortly thereafter. As the stagecoach pulled away, Savannah suddenly felt exposed on the dusty street. Several men lounging outside the saloon had taken notice of her arrival, their eyes following her movements with undisguised interest. She squared her shoulders and headed toward the building marked Sheriff's Office, hoping to find directions to her brother's property. Before she reached it, the doors of the saloon swung open and a man stumbled out, clearly deep in his cups despite the early hour. He spotted her and changed course, weaving toward her with an unpleasant grin. "Well, ain't you a pretty little thing?" he slurred, blocking her path. "New in town? Need someone to show you around?" "No, thank you," Savannah said firmly, attempting to step around him. The man moved with her, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Don't be like that, darlin'. Just being neighborly." The lady said no. The voice came from behind her, deep and steady as a drumbeat. The drunk man's face changed instantly, a flicker of fear replacing his leer. Savannah turned to find herself looking up at a tall figure silhouetted against the sun. He stepped forward, and she could see him clearly now, broad-shouldered in a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt, dusty denims tucked into scuffed boots. A weathered Stetson sat low on his brow, shadowing eyes that studied the drunk with cold warning. "Didn't mean no harm, Wade," the drunk mumbled, backing away. "Just saying hello is all." "Say your hellos from a distance, Perkins." The tall stranger Wade hadn't raised his voice, but the command in it was unmistakable. As Perkins slunk away, the man turned his attention to Savannah. His face was sun-bronzed and weathered, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble. But it was his eyes that caught her clear blue, like water in a desert. "Madam," he said simply, touching the brim of his hat. "Wade Colton. Can I help you find someone?" "Savannah Miller," she replied, finding her voice. "I'm looking for the sheriff's office. I need to inquire about my brother's property." "You're standing in front of it," he said with a slight smile, gesturing to the building behind her. "And you're speaking to the sheriff." Savannah blinked in surprise. There was no star visible on his chest, nothing to indicate his position. Reading her confusion, he reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a silver badge. "Don't always wear it. Tends to make some folks nervous." He pinned it to his vest. "Now, Miss Miller, why don't you come inside out of this heat, and we can talk about your brother's property." The sheriff's office was mercifully cool after the scorching street. Wade Colton settled behind a desk cluttered with wanted posters and paperwork, gesturing for her to take the chair opposite. "Your brother," he prompted. "Thomas Miller," Savannah explained, retrieving the letter and deed from her reticule. "He wrote to me about a ranch he purchased outside of town. He died 3 months ago in St. Louis. Typhoid." A flicker of recognition crossed the sheriff's face. I remember Miller.
Good man.
Kept to himself mostly. Paid cash for the old Jensen place about 8 months back. He accepted the papers she offered, studying them briefly. These seem in order. The property's about 5 miles north of town. I intend to live there, Savannah stated firmly, meeting his gaze. It's all I have left. Wade Colton studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, but something in those blue eyes suggested he was measuring her worth. Miss Miller, that property's been sitting empty for months. It wasn't much to begin with, and now. He trailed off. It's no place for a woman alone. I have no choice, she replied, straightening her spine. And I'm quite capable, Sheriff. I don't doubt your spirit, he said slowly. But ranching in Wyoming territory isn't like keeping house in the city. It's hard, dangerous work. I'm aware of the challenges. Wade leaned back in his chair, his gaze still fixed on her face. Do you know how to shoot? Mend fences? Handle livestock? Savannah hesitated. The truth was, she knew nothing about ranching. Her life in St. Louis had been comfortable until her parents' deaths. She'd been raised to run a household, not a ranch. But admitting that would only confirm his belief that she couldn't manage. I can learn, she said finally. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Yes, I expect you can. He stood abruptly. I'll take you out there. You should see what you're getting into before you make any decisions.
Now?
Savannah asked, startled. Unless you have other pressing engagements in Sweetwater Creek? There was a hint of amusement in his voice. No, but I should find accommodations for the night first. Surely the property isn't habitable yet. We have a small hotel. Mrs. Larson runs a clean establishment. He paused. I'll arrange a room for you, then fetch my wagon. We can reach your brother's place and return before sundown. An hour later, Savannah found herself bouncing along a rutted trail in Sheriff Colton's wagon. She'd had just enough time to secure a room at the hotel and leave her trunk, keeping only her valise with essentials. Now, she gripped the wagon seat as they jolted over the uneven terrain. The landscape was both beautiful and intimidating, vast, rolling grasslands stretching to distant mountains, broken by rocky outcroppings and the occasional stand of trees. So different from the crowded streets of St. Louis. It's beautiful, she admitted, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. Beautiful, yes. Forgiving, no. Wade handled the reins with practiced ease. Winter comes early and stays late. Summer brings drought and sometimes fire. Spring has floods. And that's before counting rustlers, wolves, and all manner of other troubles. You paint a grim picture, Sheriff. Wade, he corrected. Everyone calls me Wade. And I'm just being honest. Too many come out here with dreams of freedom and fortune, only to find hardship and ruin. And you? Savannah asked. What brought you here? Something flickered across his face, a shadow of memory. War, he said simply. After Appomattox, I couldn't go back to Virginia. Too many ghosts. The Civil War had ended 13 years ago, but Savannah knew many men still carried its scars, visible and invisible. She noted the slight stiffness in his left arm, wondered what other wounds he bore. So, you became a lawman in Wyoming territory instead. Eventually. Did some cowboying first. Some scouting for the army. He shrugged. Sweetwater Creek needed a sheriff 3 years back. I needed somewhere to belong. The simple honesty in his words touched something in Savannah. She too was looking for somewhere to belong, though she hadn't admitted it to herself until that moment. There it is, Wade said, interrupting her thoughts. He pointed ahead to where a small cabin sat nestled against a rise, a creek winding nearby. A weathered barn stood to one side, and what had once been a corral was now just a few leaning posts. As they drew closer, Savannah's heart sank. The cabin was little more than a shack, its roof sagging dangerously on one side. The barn looked slightly better, but the door hung from a single hinge. The only heartening sight was the creek bubbling cheerfully past and the rich grassland surrounding the structures. Wade brought the wagon to a stop and helped her down, his hand warm and calloused against hers. The touch was brief, but sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "It's seen better days," he acknowledged, watching her face. "Thomas wrote that it was a fine property with a solid house," Savannah said, disappointment coloring her voice. "He said it just needed a woman's touch." Wade snorted softly. "Your brother was either an optimist or—" He trailed off, apparently thinking better of maligning the dead. "A liar," Savannah finished flatly. "It wouldn't be the first time." She lifted her skirt slightly and approached the cabin, determined to see everything. The interior was worse than the exterior suggested. A layer of dust covered everything. The roof had leaked, leaving water stains on the rough plank floor. A simple iron stove stood in one corner, rusted and filthy. A rickety table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed frame, without a mattress, completed the furnishings. The previous owner was a bachelor, Wade explained, watching her from the doorway. Jensen wasn't much for housekeeping. Savannah moved to the single window and wiped away grime with her handkerchief. Through the smudged glass, she could see the creek and the mountains beyond. Despite everything, the view stirred something in her a sense of possibility. "Is the land itself good?" she asked. "Some of the best grazing in the county," Wade admitted. "Good water year-round from that creek. Your brother chose well in that regard." Savannah turned back to survey the dismal cabin. "Then the structures can be repaired." Even as she said it, she wondered how. She had very little money left after the journey west. "It would take considerable work," Wade said. His tone was neutral, but she could sense his skepticism. "And materials aren't cheap out here." "I can do much of the work myself," she insisted, though she had no idea how to begin. "Miss Miller, Savannah," she interrupted. "If I'm to call you Wade, you should call me Savannah." A faint smile touched his lips. "Savannah, then. I admire your determination, but this is more than one person can manage, especially someone with no experience in ranching or building." "What would you have me do?" she asked, frustration rising. "Go back to St. Louis? I have nothing there. No family, no home, no prospects. This land is all I have." Wade studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. "There are other options in Sweetwater. Mrs. Larson at the hotel needs help. The schoolteacher's leaving to get married next month. For that matter, half the unmarried men in the county would court you given half a chance." Savannah lifted her chin. "I didn't come west to work for others or to find husband. I came to claim what's mine." "Even if it kills you?" he asked bluntly. "It won't," she replied with more confidence than she felt. Wade sighed and shook his head. "Let's look at the barn. It's in better shape, at least." The barn was indeed more structurally sound, though it badly needed new doors and a general cleaning. There was a small loft for hay storage and 3 stalls for animals. Currently, it housed nothing but mice and a family of barn swallows that swooped anxiously overhead as they explored. "The well is good," Wade noted, demonstrating the pump outside the barn. Clear water gushed forth after a few strokes. "That's something in your favor." They walked the property line, Wade pointing out landmarks and explaining water rights. Despite the dilapidated buildings, Savannah found herself increasingly drawn to the land itself. 40 acres of good grazing, the clear creek, a small stand of cottonwoods providing shade and wind protection. "It could be something, couldn't it?" she asked as they stood on a rise overlooking the property. Wade didn't answer immediately, his gaze scanning the horizon. "With enough work, money, and luck," he finally said. "But you'd need help."
And stock.
"And supplies." He turned to face her. "What resources do you have?" Savannah hesitated, reluctant to reveal the precariousness of her situation. "Some savings," she said vaguely. "Enough to get started." His raised eyebrow told her he wasn't convinced, but he didn't press further. We should head back. It'll be dark soon. As they returned to the wagon, Savannah cast one last look at the cabin. Despite its sorry state, she felt a strange reluctance to leave. This place, however broken, was hers. I'll return tomorrow, she decided. Bring some supplies and start cleaning. Wade paused with his foot on the wagon step. Alone? Unless you're offering to help, Sheriff, she replied with a touch of defiance. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, perhaps, or respect. I have duties in town, but I know some folks who might lend a hand for the right price. I would appreciate any recommendations, Savannah said, softening her tone. Whatever his doubts about her abilities, Wade Colton had been nothing but helpful since her arrival. The return journey was quieter, both lost in their thoughts as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The fading light bathed the landscape in gold, transforming the harsh terrain into something magical. It's different from anything I've known, Savannah murmured, almost to herself. The territory gets in your blood, Wade replied. Those who stay either love it or are too stubborn to admit defeat. And which are you? She asked, curious. A rare, genuine smile crossed his face, transforming his stern features. Both, I reckon. Back in Sweetwater Creek, Wade escorted her to the hotel, carrying her valise despite her protests. Mrs. Larson, a plump, friendly woman in her 50s, greeted them in the small lobby. I've put her in the corner room, Wade, she told him with a meaningful look Savannah couldn't decipher. Quietest one we have. Much obliged, Martha, he replied. To Savannah, he added, the dining room serves breakfast at 6. Dinner's finished, but Martha can probably find you something if you're hungry. I can certainly rustle up a plate of stew and some biscuits, Mrs. Larson confirmed with a warm smile. Thank you both, Savannah said. I am rather famished. I'll stop by tomorrow morning, Wade said, already moving toward the door. Talk about those repairs. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Savannah with the curious gaze of Mrs. Larson upon her. So you're Thomas Miller's sister, the older woman said, showing her to the small dining room. Wade mentioned you've come to claim the Jensen place. Yes, Savannah confirmed, taking a seat at the single-occupied table. Though it needs considerable work. That it does, Mrs. Larson agreed, disappearing briefly into the kitchen. She returned with a steaming bowl of stew and a plate of biscuits. Your brother had big plans, but he wasn't here long enough to see them through. You knew Thomas well? Savannah asked, surprised. Sweetwater isn't large, dear. Everyone knows everyone. Mrs. Larson poured her a cup of coffee. Thomas took most of his meals here.
Charming man.
Full of grand ideas. And empty promises, Savannah thought but didn't say. She'd loved her brother, but his schemes had contributed to their parents' financial ruin. He spoke of you, Mrs. Larson continued. Said his little sister would love it out here. Said he was building something for both of you. The words sent an unexpected pang through Savannah's heart. For all his faults, Thomas had remembered her. I wish he'd had the chance to finish what he started, she said softly. Mrs. Larson patted her shoulder sympathetically. Life takes unexpected turns. But you're here now, and that's what matters. Later, in the small but clean room upstairs, Savannah sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed the emotions of the day to surface. Exhaustion, disappointment, and uncertainty washed over her in waves. The property was in far worse condition than she'd expected, her funds more limited than she'd admitted to Wade. Was she foolish to think she could make this work? Should she consider the alternatives he'd suggested, working for Mrs. Larson or applying for the teaching position? But as she moved to the window and looked out at the star-filled sky, so much vaster and brighter than in the city, something inside her rebelled at the thought of giving up before she'd even tried. This is mine, she whispered to the night. And I will make it work. With that resolve burning in her heart, Savannah prepared for bed, determined to face whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. Wade Colton arrived at the hotel just as Savannah was finishing breakfast the next morning. He nodded to Mrs. Larson and took a seat across from Savannah, declining the offer of coffee. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said without preamble. "Spoke to a few people this morning." "About me?" Savannah asked, surprised. "About helping with your property," he clarified. "Samuel Wilson's a good carpenter. Charges fair prices. His son Seth can help with the heavy work." "I appreciate the recommendation," Savannah said carefully. "But I should tell you that my funds are limited." Wade studied her face. "How limited?" Savannah hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "After purchasing supplies, I'll have perhaps $50 remaining." He let out a low whistle. "That won't get you far." "I'm aware," she replied stiffly. "But I can do much of the work myself, and I plan to be frugal." "Frugal won't fix that roof or rebuild that corral," Wade said bluntly. "And what about stock?" "A ranch needs animals to be a ranch. I thought perhaps I could start small. Chickens, maybe a milk cow. Work my way up to cattle." Wade ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Savannah, winter's coming in a few months. That cabin won't keep you alive when the snow flies." "What would you have me do?" she asked, echoing her question from yesterday. "Abandon my property? Take charity?" "Not charity," he said after a moment. "A business arrangement." Savannah narrowed her eyes. "What kind of arrangement?" "I've been looking to expand my own spread," Wade explained. "My place borders yours to the east. I could buy half your land, the eastern 20 acres. That would give you enough money to properly repair the buildings and buy some stock. Sell half my inheritance." The idea stung, though she tried to be practical. "What would the price be?" $500, he said promptly. "Fair market value." It was indeed a fair price, more than fair, given the condition of the property. With that money, she could make the necessary repairs and still have enough to purchase some livestock and supplies to last through winter. "Why would you do this?" she asked suspiciously. "You hardly know me." Wade's blue eyes met hers steadily. "It's good land that adjoins mine. Makes sense to expand."
And
He hesitated. "I admire your determination. I'd rather see you succeed than fail." Savannah considered the offer. It was generous, and likely her best chance at making the ranch viable. Yet something made her hesitate. "I need time to think about it." "Of course," Wade agreed, rising from the table. "In the meantime, I've arranged for Wilson to meet us at your property this afternoon to assess the repairs."
no obligación.
"That's very kind, but consider it neighborly assistance," he interrupted. "I'll have my wagon out front at 1 o'clock. Before she could protest further, he was gone, leaving Savannah to wonder at his interest in her success. Was it merely neighborly concern, or something more? And why did the thought make her pulse quicken? Samuel Wilson turned out to be a taciturn man in his 50s with calloused hands and assessing eyes. He spent nearly 2 hours examining every aspect of the cabin and barn, occasionally making notes in a small book he carried. "Roof's the priority," he finally declared, squinting up at the sagging structure. "Won't last another month of weather, let alone winter. Barn needs new doors, and that north wall reinforced. Corral's a complete rebuild. And the cost?" Savannah asked, bracing herself. Wilson named a figure that made her heart sink. It was nearly 3 times what she had available. "Materials are dear out here," he explained, not unkindly. "Everything has to come by wagon from Cheyenne or beyond." "I understand," Savannah said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Thank you for your assessment." Wilson glanced at Wade, who had been silent throughout the examination. Some unspoken communication passed between the men. "I've got some seasoned lumber left from the church project," Wilson said slowly. "Could let it go cheaper than new. And my boy Seth needs the work. We might be able to work something out." I couldn't accept charity, Savannah began. Not charity, Wilson interrupted. Maybe you could help my wife with preserving this fall. She's got arthritis, something fierce in her hands, makes canning painful. A fair trade for a discount on the labor. Savannah hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. That's very generous. It's how we survive out here, Wilson said simply. Helping each other. After Wilson departed, promising to send a written estimate the next day, Savannah and Wade walked along the creek in contemplative silence. The water gurgled peacefully over rocks, creating small pools where minnows darted in the clear depths. Even with Wilson's generosity, I'll need more funds, Savannah finally admitted. Your offer may be my only option. Wade skipped a stone across the water, watching it bounce 4 times before sinking. The offer stands. No rush to decide. Why are you helping me? She asked suddenly. And don't say it's just about the land. Wade was quiet for so long that Savannah thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it before. Your brother talked about you. Said his sister was the strongest person he knew, despite what everyone thought. Said you held your family together through your parents' illnesses, through the financial troubles. He glanced at her. Said he was building this place as much for you as for himself. Tears pricked unexpectedly at Savannah's eyes. Thomas said that? Wade nodded. He was proud of you. Said you deserved more than what life had dealt you. We weren't always close, she admitted. After our parents died, he became reckless. Made bad decisions. I blamed him for some of our misfortunes. We all make mistakes, Wade said quietly. The territory is a place for second chances. Something in his tone made her wonder what second chances he had sought in Wyoming. There was more to Wade Colton than the stern sheriff, she was beginning to realize. I think I will accept your offer, Savannah decided. Half the land for $500. It's the practical choice. Good, Wade said, his expression softening slightly. We can draw up the papers tomorrow in town. For now, let's head back before it gets dark. As they returned to the wagon, Savannah cast one last look at the cabin. Despite its decrepit state, she could almost see what it might become with proper care a home, perhaps even a happy one. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. With the sale finalized and funds in hand, Savannah threw herself into transforming the Jensen place, now the Miller Ranch, as she had decided to call it. Samuel Wilson and his son began work on the roof and structural repairs, while Savannah focused on making the cabin habitable. She scrubbed every surface, replaced the broken window glass, and whitewashed the interior walls. She purchased simple furnishings from the general store: a proper bed, a rocking chair, cooking utensils, and linens. Wade stopped by regularly, ostensibly to check on the progress, but often staying to lend a hand with heavier tasks. Savannah found herself looking forward to his visits, their initially cautious relationship warming into something that felt increasingly like friendship. You've accomplished a lot, he remarked one evening as they sat on the newly repaired porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Hardly the same place it was 2 weeks ago. Savannah smiled, surveying her handiwork with pride. The cabin, while still simple, was now clean and welcoming. The roof no longer leaked, the chimney had been repaired, and fresh curtains hung at the windows. It's beginning to feel like home, she admitted, though there's still much to do. Always is on a ranch, Wade agreed. Speaking of which, Dan Foster's bringing those chickens and the milk cow tomorrow. You sure you know how to handle them? Mrs. Wilson has been teaching me, Savannah said. I spent yesterday learning to milk at their farm. It's not as difficult as I expected. Wade chuckled. Wait until the cow decides to kick over the bucket. I'll manage, she said confidently. 2 weeks of hard physical labor had taught her she was stronger than she'd realized. Mrs. Larson showed me how to make butter and cheese, too. You're adapting well, Wade observed, his blue eyes warm with something that might have been admiration. Better than most who come out here. I didn't have much choice, Savannah replied honestly. But I find I enjoy the work more than I expected. There's satisfaction in seeing direct results from your efforts. That there is, he agreed. He hesitated, then added, Town's holding a harvest dance next Saturday. Thought you might like to attend. Meet more of your neighbors. Savannah glanced at him, surprised by the invitation. A dance? Nothing fancy, Wade said quickly. Just a community gathering. Food music. Happens every fall before harvest gets too busy. I'd like that, Savannah said, a warm flutter in her chest at the thought of spending an evening in Wade's company that didn't involve manual labor. Though I don't have anything suitable to wear for a dance. What you're wearing now is fine, he assured her, nodding at her simple blue calico dress. Like I said, it's not fancy. As Wade rode away that evening, Savannah found herself watching his retreating figure longer than necessary. Over the past 2 weeks, her initial wariness of the stern sheriff had transformed into respect and something warmer she wasn't quite ready to name. The day of the dance arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp and clear, with just enough chill in the air to hint at the coming winter. Savannah spent the morning completing her chores, feeding her small collection of livestock, 6 chickens, a milk cow named Bessie, and a placid old horse called General that Wade had helped her acquire for transportation, before turning her attention to her own appearance. She washed her hair and pinned it up in a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun, allowing a few curls to frame her face. Her blue dress, her best, though still plain by St. Louis standards, had been carefully pressed. She even indulged in a dab of rose water, a small luxury she'd purchased from the general store. Wade arrived promptly at 4 o'clock, driving his wagon rather than riding his usual mount. He'd clearly made an effort with his own appearance, as well his customary stubble was gone, his hair freshly trimmed, and he wore a clean white shirt under a black vest. His only concession to his position was the sheriff's badge pinned to his chest. You look lovely, he said simply as he helped her into the wagon. Thank you, Savannah replied, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. You clean up rather well yourself, Sheriff. A smile touched the corner of his mouth. Special occasion. The town hall was decorated with autumn leaves and paper lanterns for the dance. Long tables laden with food lined one wall, while a small group of musicians tuned their instruments on a makeshift stage. Already, the room was filling with people, families with children, older couples, young men in their best clothes looking nervously at clusters of giggling young women. As Wade escorted her inside, Savannah was surprised by how many people greeted her by name. In just 2 weeks, she had met more of her neighbors than she'd known in years in St. Louis. Mrs. Wilson waved from where she was arranging pies on a table. Samuel nodded in greeting. Even taciturn Dan Foster, who had delivered her livestock, tipped his hat as they passed. Everyone knows who you are, she murmured to Wade. Small town, he replied with a shrug. And you've made an impression. Not many women would take on a rundown ranch alone. I haven't been alone, Savannah said softly. I've had help. Yours especially. Something flickered in Wade's eyes, but before he could respond, Mrs. Larson descended upon them, beaming. Savannah, dear. And Wade, how handsome you look without all that scruff on your face. She took Savannah's arm. Come, you must meet everyone properly. So many people have been asking about Thomas Miller's sister. For the next hour, Savannah found herself introduced to what seemed like the entire population of Sweetwater Creek and the surrounding ranches, names and faces blurred together, though she did her best to remember each one. Wade remained close by, occasionally offering quiet explanations or introductions of his own. When the music started, couples began to take to the floor. Savannah watched with delight as everything from dignified waltzes to lively reels unfolded before her. Would you care to dance? Wade asked, extending his hand. I'd love to, Savannah replied, placing her hand in his. His touch was warm and sure as he led her onto the floor. For a man of his size, Wade moved with surprising grace, guiding her confidently through a waltz. Savannah found herself acutely aware of his hand to her waist, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the way his blue eyes never left her face. "You dance well," she remarked, slightly breathless. "My mother's influence," he replied. She insisted her sons learn proper manners, even on a Virginia plantation. "You never speak of your family," Savannah observed. A shadow crossed his face. "Not much to tell.
Parents gone.
Brother too. War took them all, one way or another." "I'm sorry," Savannah said softly. "It was a long time ago," Wade said, but his eyes told a different story. "What about you? Any family besides Thomas?" Savannah shook her head. "Just Thomas. Our parents died 2 years ago, within months of each other. Father's heart, then mother simply faded away." "So we're both alone in the world," Wade observed. "Not anymore," Savannah said impulsively. "We have Sweetwater now." Something in his expression softened. "Yes, we do." They danced twice more before taking a break for refreshments. Wade fetched them both cups of punch, and they found a relatively quiet corner to observe the festivities. "Everyone seems so happy," Savannah remarked, watching the diverse gathering. "Despite the hardships of life out here." "Maybe because of them," Wade suggested. "You learn to appreciate the good moments when you've weathered the bad ones together." "Is that why you stayed?" "For the community." Wade considered the question.
Partly.
"After the war, I drifted. Couldn't settle anywhere. Everything felt hollow." He took a sip of punch. Sweetwater was just another stop at first. Then old Sheriff Billings got shot chasing horse thieves. Town needed someone to step up. Found myself volunteering. He shrugged. 3 years later, still here. "And you're content?" Savannah asked, genuinely curious. "Most days," he admitted. "Though lately I've been thinking about the future more." Before she could ask what he meant, they were interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A young man stumbled in, his clothes dusty from the trail, his expression urgent. "Sheriff," he called, spotting Wade. "Raiders hit the Thornton place. Stole a dozen head of cattle and lit the barn on fire." Wade was instantly alert, all traces of the relaxed dancing partner gone. "Anyone hurt?" "Mr. Thornton took a bullet in the shoulder. Mrs. Thornton's tending him. Their boy rode for help." Wade turned to Savannah, regret in his eyes. "I have to go." "Of course," she said, understanding immediately. "Be careful." He hesitated, then squeezed her hand briefly. "I'll come by tomorrow, let you know what happened." As Wade strode away, already calling for volunteers to join him, Savannah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. The dangers of the territory, which had seemed abstract until now, suddenly felt very real. Mrs. Wilson appeared at her side. "First time seeing Wade off on sheriff business?" Savannah nodded. "Are such raids common?" "Common enough," the older woman said grimly. "Rustlers come through every few months. Usually just steal stock, but sometimes they get violent." She patted Savannah's arm. "Wade knows what he's doing. He'll be back." But as Savannah watched Wade organize a posse and ride out into the gathering darkness, she couldn't shake the fear that had lodged in her heart. In just 2 weeks, Wade Colton had become important to her in ways she hadn't expected. The thought of him facing armed raiders left her cold with dread. The dance continued, but the mood had shifted. Many of the men had departed with Wade, leaving wives and sweethearts to carry on with forced cheer. Savannah found herself unable to join in. After an hour of attempting to maintain pleasant conversation, she accepted Mrs. Wilson's offer of a ride home. Back at her cabin, Savannah found sleep elusive. She sat by the window, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the moonlit landscape for any sign of riders returning. None came. Dawn broke with no news. Savannah went about her chores mechanically, feeding the animals and preparing her own simple breakfast without tasting it. By mid-morning, her nerves were stretched thin with worry. The sound of hoofbeats finally came around noon. Savannah rushed to the door to find Wade dismounting from his horse. Relief flooded through her at the sight of him, dusty and clearly exhausted, but whole and unharmed. "You're all right," she breathed, moving down the porch steps toward him. "I'm fine," he assured her, his voice rough with fatigue. "Thought you'd want to know what happened." "Come inside," Savannah urged. "You look dead on your feet. I'll make coffee." Wade didn't protest, following her into the cabin and sinking into a chair at the table. Savannah busied herself with the coffee pot, stealing glances at him as she worked. There was a new cut on his cheekbone and dirt smudged across his forehead, but otherwise he appeared uninjured. "We caught up to them near the pass," he said as she placed a steaming mug before him. 6 men. Managed to recover most of the cattle. "And the raiders?" Savannah asked, taking the seat opposite him. 2 dead. 3 in custody. 1 escaped into the mountains. Wade took a long drink of coffee. "They'll face trial in Cheyenne next month. And Mr. Thornton? He'll recover." Bullet went clean through. Wade rubbed a hand over his face. "His barn's a loss, though. We'll organize a raising once he's back on his feet." Savannah studied him, noting the shadows under his eyes, the weariness in his posture. "You haven't slept." "No time," he admitted. "Had to get the prisoners secured, take statements, send telegrams to the territorial marshal." "You should rest," she said firmly. "You can use my bed for a few hours." Wade shook his head. "I should get back to town. Still have duties." "The town can manage without you for a few hours," Savannah insisted. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." A faint smile touched his lips. "Giving orders now, Miss Miller?" "Someone needs to be sensible," she retorted. "The bed's there. Use it. I'll wake you in 2 hours." Perhaps a testament to his fatigue, Wade didn't argue further. He finished his coffee, removed his boots and gun belt, and stretched out on her bed with a grateful sigh. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Savannah found herself watching him, struck by how different he looked in repose. The stern lines of his face softened, making him appear younger, more vulnerable. On impulse, she moved to the bedside and gently brushed a lock of dark hair from his forehead. The gesture felt strangely intimate, stirring emotions she wasn't quite ready to examine. She let him sleep for 3 hours before reluctantly waking him. He came alert instantly, his hand reaching for the gun that wasn't there before he remembered where he was. "Sorry," he murmured, sitting up and running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Force of habit." "No need to apologize," Savannah assured him. "I've made some food, if you're hungry." They shared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and biscuits. Wade ate with the appreciation of a hungry man, while Savannah found herself strangely content just to sit across from him at her small table. There was a comfortable domesticity to the moment that she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. "Thank you," Wade said as he prepared to leave. "For the bed, the food. Everything." "It's nothing compared to what you've done for me," Savannah replied honestly. "I wouldn't have managed these past weeks without your help." Wade studied her face, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "You'd have found a way. You're stronger than you know, Savannah Miller." The way he said her name sent a warm flutter through her chest. "Will I see you tomorrow?" she asked impulsively. "Count on it," he promised. As autumn deepened, Savannah settled into the rhythms of ranch life. Each day brought new challenges and lessons, but also a growing confidence in her abilities. The cabin became truly her home, filled with small touches that reflected her personality: wildflowers in jars on the table, a colorful quilt on the bed, books stacked beside the rocking chair. Wade remained a constant presence, stopping by every day or two with supplies, advice, or simply his company. Their friendship deepened through shared meals, long conversations on the porch, and occasional visits to town together. Savannah found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet strength of the man, his dry humor, his unwavering integrity. On a crisp October morning, Wade arrived with an unexpected proposition. "I've got 20 head of cattle I'm looking to sell," he said as they walked the perimeter of her newly repaired corral. "Young stock, good breeding. They'd give you a solid start toward building a herd." "I can't afford 20 cattle," Savannah said regretfully. "Even with the improvements I've made, I'm still operating on a tight budget." "I'm not looking for cash," Wade explained. "More of a partnership arrangement. I provide the cattle, you raise them. We split the calves next year." Savannah stopped walking to look at him directly. "Why would you do that? It benefits you very little." Wade met her gaze steadily. "I have more cattle than I can properly manage on my own. My foreman's leaving to start his own place in Montana. Rather than hire someone new, spreading the herd makes sense." It was a logical explanation, but Savannah sensed there was more to it. "And," a slight smile touched his lips, "and I'd like to see you succeed here. This arrangement helps us both." Savannah considered the offer. It was generous, but not charity, a distinction that mattered to her pride. "I accept," she said finally, "though I'll need guidance. I've never managed cattle before." "That's part of the arrangement," Wade assured her. "I'll teach you what you need to know." True to his word, the cattle arrived the next day, 20 healthy young cows that regarded their new home with suspicious eyes. Over the following weeks, Wade taught Savannah the basics of cattle management: how to check for illness, when to move them to fresh pasture, how to ensure they had adequate water and shelter for the coming winter. "You're a quick study," he remarked one evening as they sat on her porch after a long day of work. The autumn sun was setting early now, casting long shadows across the land. "I have a good teacher," Savannah replied, smiling at him over the rim of her coffee cup. Wade's expression softened in the fading light. "Savannah, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. "Yes." Before he could continue, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted them. Wade was immediately alert, his hand moving to the gun at his hip as he stood. A rider appeared at the edge of the property, moving at a steady pace. As he drew closer, Savannah recognized Seth Wilson, Samuel's son. "Sheriff," the young man called, reining in his horse. "Pa sent me to fetch you. Telegram came from the marshal in Cheyenne. Those rustlers escaped during transport. Marshal thinks they're headed back this way." Wade's expression hardened. "When?" "2 days ago. Could be in the area already." Wade turned to Savannah, concern evident in his eyes. "I need to get back to town, organize patrols." "Of course," she said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Will you come back tomorrow?" "As soon as I can," he promised. To Seth, he added, "Tell your pa to spread the word. Everyone should be on alert, especially outlying ranches." After they had gone, Savannah found herself pacing the cabin, unsettled by the news. The escaped rustlers posed a threat to everyone in the area, but particularly to isolated ranches like hers. For the first time since moving in, she found herself acutely aware of her vulnerability. She checked that her doors and windows were securely latched, then retrieved the rifle Wade had insisted on teaching her to use. She wasn't a great shot yet, but she could hit a target at close range. The weight of the weapon was reassuring as she placed it beside her bed. Sleep came fitfully that night, broken by every creak of the cabin and rustle of wind. Savannah rose before dawn, exhausted but too anxious to remain in bed. She completed her morning chores with the rifle slung over her shoulder, constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. By mid-morning, her nerves had settled somewhat. The familiar routine of work provided a distraction from her fears. She was in the barn, milking Bessie, when she heard horses approaching, several of them, moving quickly. Heart pounding, Savannah set aside the milk pail and reached for her rifle. Through the barn door, she could see 4 riders approaching the cabin. They weren't Wade or any of the neighbors she'd come to know. Moving quietly, she slipped out the back of the barn and made her way to the cabin, staying low and using the corral for cover. If she could reach the cabin undetected, she could defend herself from inside. She was halfway there when one of the riders spotted her. "There," he shouted, wheeling his horse in her direction. Abandoning stealth, Savannah ran for the cabin, rifle clutched tightly. She reached the porch just as the first rider arrived, cutting off her path to the door. "Well, what have we here?" the man drawled, a cruel smile splitting his bearded face. "Pretty little thing, ain't she, boys?" The other riders had circled around, effectively trapping her. Savannah raised her rifle, aiming it at the speaker. "Get off my property," she said, proud that her voice remained steady despite her terror. The man laughed. "Your property? That's rich. This here's the old Jensen place. Tom Jensen ain't lived here in years." "It belongs to me now," Savannah stated firmly. "Savannah Miller. My brother purchased it legally." Recognition flickered in the man's eyes. "Miller? You Thomas Miller's kin?" "His sister," Savannah confirmed, rifle still raised. "Now state your business or leave." The 4 men exchanged glances. "We've got business with your brother," another man said. "Where is he?" "Dead," Savannah replied flatly. "Typhoid took him 3 months ago." This news seemed to disturb the men. They conferred in low voices, occasionally casting glances her way. "What business did you have with my brother?" Savannah demanded, growing increasingly uneasy. The bearded man dismounted, ignoring her rifle. "That's between us and him. But seeing as he's not available, maybe you can help us instead." "I doubt that," Savannah said coldly. "Now leave, before I'm forced to defend myself." The man took a step toward her, unimpressed by her threat. "That's a big gun for a little lady. You even know how to use it." Savannah's finger tightened on the trigger. "Try me." Something in her voice must have convinced him she was serious. He stopped advancing, though his mocking smile remained. "No need for that. We're just looking for something your brother took from us. Return it, and we'll be on our way." "I don't know what you're talking about," Savannah said truthfully. "I inherited this property and nothing else." "Search the cabin," the bearded man ordered one of his companions. "The barn, too. It's got to be here somewhere." "You have no right," Savannah protested, swinging her rifle toward the man moving toward her cabin.
It was a mistake.
The moment her attention shifted, the bearded man lunged forward, grabbing the barrel of her rifle and wrenching it from her grasp. Savannah cried out as the weapon was torn from her hands, leaving her defenseless. "Now, Miss Miller," the man said, his tone hardening as he pointed her own rifle at her. "We can do this easy or hard. Your choice." Savannah's mind raced. These men clearly believed Thomas had something that belonged to them. Given her brother's history, it was entirely possible he'd been involved in something unsavory. But she genuinely had no idea what they were seeking. "I arrived from St. Louis less than a month ago," she explained, trying to keep her voice calm. "I know nothing about my brother's activities here. Whatever you're looking for, I don't have it." The man studied her face, searching for deceit. "Your brother stole $5,000 from us. Said he was investing it. Never saw a penny back." Savannah's heart sank. It sounded exactly like one of Thomas's schemes. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said carefully, "but I have no knowledge of any money. As you can see," she gestured at the simple cabin and surrounding property, "I'm hardly living in luxury." The men conferred again while Savannah stood frozen on the porch, acutely aware of how isolated her ranch was. Even if she screamed, there was no one close enough to hear. "Cabin's clean," reported the man who had searched inside. "Nothing but woman's things and basic supplies." "Check the barn again," the leader ordered. Look for loose floorboards, hidden compartments. Miller was a slippery one. As two of the men headed toward the barn, Savannah's fear was replaced by a growing anger. Thomas's recklessness had once again left her to deal with the consequences. If she survived this encounter, she vowed to never again be so vulnerable. The sound of approaching riders drew everyone's attention. Savannah's heart leaped with hope as she recognized Wade's tall figure leading several men toward the ranch at a gallop. The bearded man cursed, grabbing Savannah's arm and pulling her roughly against him, the rifle pressed to her side. "Don't move," he hissed in her ear. Wade and his men, she recognized Seth Wilson and Dan Foster among them, drew their horses to a halt a short distance away, assessing the situation with experienced eyes. "Let her go, Harmon," Wade called, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "You're already facing charges for the Thornton raid. Don't add kidnapping to the list." "Stay back, Sheriff," the man Harmon shouted. "This doesn't concern you. It's between us and the Miller woman. Anything that happens in my county concerns me," Wade replied evenly. His blue eyes met Savannah's briefly, a silent message of reassurance. "Especially when it involves threatening one of my citizens." "She's harboring stolen money," Harmon insisted. "Her brother was a thief." "Whatever grievance you have, this isn't the way to address it," Wade said, his tone reasonable but firm. "Release Miss Miller, surrender your weapons, and we can discuss this civilly." Harmon's grip tightened painfully on Savannah's arm. "Not happening. We want our money." "There is no money," Savannah said through gritted teeth. "I've told you that." Wade dismounted slowly, handing his reins to Seth. "Harmon, you're outnumbered and surrounded. There's no way this ends well for you if you harm her." The standoff stretched for several tense moments. Savannah could feel Harmon's indecision in the way his grip alternately tightened and loosened on her arm. "We just want what's ours," he finally said, his voice less certain. "And you'll get justice," Wade promised. "But not like this." Something in Wade's steady gaze must have reached the man. With a muttered curse, he shoved Savannah away from him. She stumbled but managed to keep her feet, immediately moving toward Wade. The moment she was clear, Wade's men moved in, disarming Harmon and his companions with swift efficiency. Within minutes, all four were bound and being loaded onto horses for the journey to town. Wade crossed to Savannah, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No," she assured him, though her arm ached where Harmon had gripped it. "How did you know to come?" "Seth mentioned the rustlers might have a connection to your brother," Wade explained. "I remembered Thomas associating with Harmon and his gang before they turned to rustling. Thought they might come looking for him." His jaw tightened. "I should have warned you sooner." "You couldn't have known," Savannah said, placing a hand on his arm. "But what did they mean about Thomas stealing their money?" Wade sighed. "Your brother had a talent for convincing people to invest in ventures that never materialized. Harmon and his crew were among his victims. They turned to rustling after losing their stake to Thomas." The revelation stung, though it didn't surprise her. "More of Thomas's messes for others to clean up," she said bitterly. Wade's expression softened. "You're not responsible for your brother's actions, Savannah." "But I am affected by them," she pointed out. "Those men could have killed me over money I never saw." "But they didn't," Wade reminded her. "And now they'll face justice for this and the Thornton raid." As the other men prepared to depart with the prisoners, Wade lingered. "I don't like leaving you here alone after this," he admitted. "Would you consider staying in town for a few days? Mrs. Larson would be happy to have you." Savannah considered the offer. The encounter had shaken her more than she cared to admit. The thought of spending the night alone in the cabin, jumping at every sound, held little appeal. "Perhaps for tonight," she conceded. "But I'll need to return tomorrow for the animals." "I'll send Seth over to handle the chores," Wade assured her. "Pack what you need for a couple of days." As Savannah gathered her essentials, she found herself both grateful for Wade's concern and frustrated by her own vulnerability. She had come west to build an independent life, yet here she was, fleeing to town at the first sign of trouble. But as she mounted the horse Wade had brought for her and rode beside him towards Sweetwater Creek, she had to acknowledge the wisdom in accepting help when needed. Independence didn't have to mean isolation. "What were you going to ask me?" she inquired suddenly, remembering their interrupted conversation from earlier. Before Seth arrived with news of the escape, Wade glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. "It can wait," he said after a moment. "Let's get you safely settled first." Though curious, Savannah didn't press. Whatever Wade had wanted to discuss, it seemed it would keep for another day. Savannah spent 3 nights at the hotel in Sweetwater Creek before returning to her ranch. The time in town provided an unexpected opportunity to deepen her connections with the community. Mrs. Larson insisted she join the weekly sewing circle, where Savannah met more of the local women and gained valuable insights into surviving winter in the territory. The general store owner, Mr. Jenkins, offered credit until spring if she found herself short on supplies. Even the taciturn blacksmith, McCreary, promised to look in on her property when passing by. "Folks are taking to you," Wade observed as he drove her home on the 4th day. "Not everyone who comes west manages to fit in so well." "They've been very kind," Savannah agreed. "I never expected such a welcome." "You've earned their respect," Wade said. "Taking on a ranch alone, working to improve it, not asking for charity. That matters out here." "I haven't been alone, though," Savannah pointed out. "I've had help." "Yours especially." Wade's hands tightened slightly on the reins.
About that.
He hesitated, then continued. "There was something I wanted to ask you before we were interrupted the other day." Savannah's pulse quickened. "Yes, winter's coming," Wade said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Your place is isolated. The cabin's improved, but it's still not ideal for the cold months. And after what happened with Harmon." He trailed off. "What are you suggesting?" Savannah prompted when he didn't continue. Wade took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting a partnership. Of sorts." "Another business arrangement?" Savannah asked, trying to ignore the disappointment that washed through her. "No," Wade said firmly. "Not business." He finally turned to look at her, his blue eyes intense. "Savannah, I care for you. More than I expected to when you first arrived. More than I've cared for anyone in a long time." Savannah's breath caught in her throat. "Wade, I'm not proposing marriage," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. That would be too soon. But I am proposing we consider it. For the winter, you could stay at my ranch. It's larger, better built. You'd have your own room, complete privacy. We could use the time to get to know each other better. See if we suit." The offer took Savannah by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. There had been something growing between them these past weeks, a connection that went beyond mere friendship or neighborly concern. "People would talk," she said, considering the practicalities. "They already do," Wade replied with a slight smile. "Half the town expects an announcement any day now." "And if we find we don't suit?" Savannah asked, needing to consider all possibilities. "Then you return to your own place in spring. No harm done," Wade said simply. "I'm not asking for promises, Savannah. Just a chance." As they approached her ranch, Savannah considered his proposition. It was unconventional, certainly, but then everything about her new life in Wyoming was unconventional. And the prospect of spending the winter in Wade's company, learning more about the man who had come to mean so much to her, was undeniably appealing. "I need time to think," she said finally as he helped her down from the wagon. "It's not a decision to make lightly." "Of course," Wade agreed, no pressure in his tone. "Take all the time you need." Over the next few days, Savannah contemplated Wade's offer from every angle. Practically speaking, it made sense. His ranch was indeed larger and better established, with a proper barn for the animals and a house built to withstand Wyoming winters. Her own place, while improved, still had weaknesses that concerned her as the weather grew colder. But it was the personal aspect of the arrangement that gave her pause. Wade Colton had awakened feelings in her that she'd never expected to experience again after the pain of losing her family. The thought of those feelings deepening, of perhaps building a future with him, both thrilled and terrified her. What if she opened her heart only to lose him too? What if they discovered they couldn't live together harmoniously? What if the rumors in town damaged her reputation beyond repair? Yet against these fears, another voice whispered, "What if this is your chance for happiness? What if Wade is the partner you never knew you needed?" A week after his proposal, Wade arrived at her cabin as the sun was setting. They sat on the porch in companionable silence, watching the fiery orbs sink below the distant mountains. "I've been thinking about your offer," Savannah said finally, turning to face him. "And?" Wade prompted, his expression carefully neutral. "I have conditions," she stated firmly. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'd expect nothing less. First, we tell people I'm staying as your housekeeper for the winter. It's more respectable than the truth." Wade nodded. "Agreed. Second, I bring my animals. They're few enough not to be a burden on your operation." "Of course." "Third," Savannah continued, her voice softening slightly, "if at any point either of us decides this arrangement isn't working, we speak honestly about it. No false politeness or enduring something that makes us unhappy." "Honesty above all," Wade agreed. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Savannah took a deep breath. "Then yes, I accept your offer. I'll stay at your ranch for the winter." The smile that transformed Wade's face made her heart skip. He reached across the space between them to take her hand, his touch warm and sure. "You won't regret it," he promised. "I hope not," Savannah replied, returning his smile. "Because I find I've grown quite fond of Wyoming territory. And its sheriff." Wade's ranch proved to be everything he described and more. Situated in a protected valley about 10 miles from Sweetwater Creek, the main house was a substantial two-story structure built of sturdy logs with a stone foundation. A large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings completed the compound. Fields of hay stretched behind the barn, while cattle grazed on the surrounding hillsides. "It's beautiful," Savannah breathed as they crested the final rise, revealing the ranch spread out below them. "My home for 7 years now," Wade said, a note of pride in his voice. "Started with just the cabin that's now the bunkhouse. Built the main house 3 years ago." "You built it yourself?" Savannah asked, impressed. "With help," Wade clarified. "Same as you've had with your place. No one builds alone out here." As they approached, a tall, lanky young man emerged from the barn to greet them. "Miss Miller, this is Jake Peterson, my foreman," Wade introduced them. "Jake, Miss Miller will be staying through winter as my housekeeper." If Jake found this arrangement unusual, he gave no sign of it. "Madam," he said politely, touching the brim of his hat. "Good to meet you. Sheriff's been talking about you plenty." "Has he now?" Savannah asked, shooting Wade an amused glance. "Only good things," Wade assured her quickly. Jake helped unload Savannah's belongings while Wade showed her to her room, a pleasant chamber on the second floor with windows overlooking the valley. It was simply but comfortably furnished with a bed, dresser, washstand, and rocking chair. "My room is down the hall," Wade explained. "Kitchen and living areas downstairs. You'll have complete privacy here." "It's lovely," Savannah said sincerely. "Far more comfortable than my cabin." "Make yourself at home," Wade urged. "I need to check on some things with Jake, but I'll be back for supper." Left alone, Savannah unpacked her few possessions, arranging them carefully in the dresser drawers. The domesticity of the act struck her suddenly. Here she was, settling into Wade Colton's home, as if she belonged there. It was both thrilling and terrifying. Life at the ranch quickly fell into a comfortable rhythm. Savannah took over the household duties, cooking meals and keeping the house in order. Wade taught her more about cattle ranching, including how to ride properly, a skill she'd never mastered in St. Louis. Jake proved to be a patient teacher as well, showing her how to mend fences and recognize signs of illness in livestock. As November turned to December, the weather grew increasingly harsh. Snow fell frequently, transforming the landscape into a glittering white expanse. On clear days, the beauty was breathtaking. On stormy ones, Savannah was profoundly grateful for the solid walls and warm hearth of Wade's home. One evening, as a blizzard howled outside, they sat before the fire in the cozy living room. Wade was reading a dog-eared copy of the Iliad, while Savannah worked on mending one of his shirts. The domesticity of the scene struck her again, but this time without the accompanying anxiety. Instead, she felt a deep contentment. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, looking up from his book to find her watching him. "That I'm happy," Savannah admitted simply. "Happier than I expected to be when I came west." Wade set his book aside. Even with all the hardships? The rustlers, the harsh weather, the isolation. Perhaps because of them, in a way, she reflected. In St. Louis, my life was comfortable, but empty. Here, every day brings challenges, but also satisfaction. And connection. She met his gaze. Real connection. Wade moved from his chair to join her on the sofa, taking her hand in his. "I feel it too," he said quietly. "When you first stepped off that stagecoach, covered in dust and looking so determined despite your obvious exhaustion, something inside me recognized you. As if I'd been waiting, without knowing it." Savannah's heart quickened at his words. "I was terrified that day," she confessed. Alone in a strange place, with nothing but Thomas's exaggerated promises to guide me. Then you appeared, so solid and certain. You've been my anchor ever since. And you've been my revelation, Wade replied, his voice deep with emotion. I'd resigned myself to solitude. Thought it was my lot after everything I'd lost. Then you arrived and showed me there could be more. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, Wade raised his free hand to cup her cheek. Savannah leaned into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. When he finally lowered his head to kiss her, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss tender rather than demanding. Savannah responded with equal gentleness, her heart soaring with emotions too complex to name. When they finally parted, she found herself breathless, her cheeks flushed with more than the fire's heat. I'm falling in love with you, Savannah Miller, Wade said softly, his blue eyes intense in the firelight. Happened since you stood up to me that first day, insisting you could manage that ranch alone. Why me? Savannah whispered, overwhelmed by his declaration. Wade's expression softened into a smile. Because you're my forever, he said simply. The one I've been waiting for without knowing it. The missing piece that makes everything else make sense. Tears pricked at Savannah's eyes. I never expected this when I came west. Never thought I'd find someone who understands me the way you do. Is that a good thing? Wade asked, a hint of vulnerability in his question. The best thing, Savannah assured him, reaching up to touch his face. Because I'm falling in love with you too, Wade Colton. Their second kiss was deeper, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally separated, Wade kept her close, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the fire together. What happens when spring comes? Savannah asked eventually, voicing the question that had lingered in her mind. Whatever we want, Wade replied. You could return to your ranch if you choose. Or, she prompted. Or you could stay, he said. As my wife, if you'll have me. Though they had been moving toward this moment for weeks, the actual proposal still took Savannah's breath away. Are you asking me to marry you? Sheriff Colton? I believe I am Miss Miller, Wade confirmed, his smile warm but his eyes serious. Not right away. When you're ready. When we're both sure. Savannah considered his words, his face, the future he was offering. I think I'm already sure, she admitted. These months with you have shown me everything I need to know. Is that a yes? Wade asked, hope brightening his eyes. It's a yes, Savannah confirmed, her heart full to bursting. Yes, I'll marry you, Wade Colton. The blizzard continued to rage outside, but within the walls of the ranch house, Savannah had found a warmth and belonging she'd never thought possible. From the moment she'd stepped off that stagecoach into the dusty streets of Sweetwater Creek, her life had been transforming. Now, in Wade's arms, she knew that transformation was complete. Spring arrived in Wyoming territory with a riot of wildflowers and new growth. The wedding of Sheriff Wade Colton and Miss Savannah Miller was the social event of the season in Sweetwater Creek. Everyone from miles around attended, filling the small church to capacity. Savannah wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Wilson and the sewing circle had helped her create. Wade, resplendent in a new black suit, looked at her with such love as she walked down the aisle that she nearly forgot to breathe. Their vows were straightforward but heartfelt, promising love and partnership through whatever life might bring. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Wade's kiss held all the promise of their future together. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with dancing, feasting, and much good-natured teasing of the sheriff, who had finally met his match in the determined young woman from St. Louis. What do you think of your new home? Wade asked later that night, as they stood on the porch of the ranch house, their home now, officially. It's perfect, Savannah replied, leaning into his embrace. Though I have plans for improvements. Wade chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her back. I expected nothing less. We should expand the garden, Savannah continued, warming to her subject. And perhaps add a room to the east side, for when we need it. A room for what? Wade asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Savannah turned in his arms to face him. For children, of course. Someday. Wade's expression softened. I'd like that. Very much. So would I, Savannah admitted. Though perhaps not right away. We have time. All the time in the world, Wade agreed, bending to kiss her once more. As stars appeared in the vast Wyoming sky, Savannah marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From a bereaved, nearly destitute young woman to a ranch owner, a wife, a valued member of the community. The path had not been easy, but every hardship had led her to this moment, this man, this life. What are you thinking? Wade asked, echoing his frequent question. That I finally understand why Thomas sent for me, Savannah replied. He knew, somehow, that this was where I belonged. Not just on the ranch, but here in Wyoming, with you. Then I owe your brother a debt I can never repay, Wade said solemnly. We'll honor it by building the life he envisioned, Savannah decided. A successful ranch, a happy home. And a family, Wade added. Don't forget that part. Never, Savannah promised, her heart full as she gazed up at the man who had changed her world. The man who, when she'd questioned why he'd chosen her, had given the perfect answer. Because you're my forever. And as Wade led her into their home to begin their life together, Savannah knew with absolute certainty that forever was just beginning.